Okay, Ivy, back to you or Jill.
Okay, we're rolling. Welcome to the Town Board work session for Tuesday, March 31st, 2020. We expect to be joined shortly by our County Executive, George Latimer, to give the Town Board and the public an update on the county's preparation and response to the coronavirus pandemic. So with that in mind, I'm going to sort of reserve some of our initial comments on that topic and wait for the county executive to do an update first. And in the meantime, Jill, should we jump into the other items on our agenda while we're waiting?
Sure. So I'm wondering whether or not we might start with the electronic bid submission and try to get through the administrative items, and then we'll come back to our public hearing. Hopefully the county executive will be on by then, so we don't have to interrupt that. Nick, can you bring the board up to speed on our electronic bid submission and why we're trying to do this?
I can, Joe, and I apologize. My internet just kicked me off of my server at home, so I'm going to do this from memory. The reason we're suggesting this is to, obviously with the COVID-19 matter, there's another opportunity to practice social distancing, and that is to limit contact with bidders, either dropping things off in the town hall lockbox or staff having to handle paper submissions from bidders. So New York State law allows a municipality to opt in by the adoption of a resolution to receive email submissions from bidders and to then set forth a protocol by which those emails would be opened up. And we'd work with town staff on doing that, but it allows the town to receive bids electronically as opposed to through the mail or being dropped off in person.
And we actually have a bid opening scheduled for April 17th at this point. And so it's, we realized that we had to deal with it sooner rather than later.
And the governor did issue an executive order that does allow for there to be virtual bid openings. In the general municipal law, there's a requirement that bids be opened in public. The executive order does allow it to be done through a video conferencing or in other manner, but this would allow social distancing to be better implemented.
So we actually have a resolution this evening before the board for approval to allow us to institute this.
Yeah, it seems like, why wouldn't we do this?
In the past, we were concerned that with the influx of emails that we have and with emails getting buried, I get hundreds of them a day, that this would be, a problem, and we wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be an issue. But, more and more, it seems like, that's not a good reason anymore. So
I assume we would set up a separate bid submission email address in any case.
Exactly right. Yes. Exactly right. So we wouldn't have to worry about it all, siphoning through. The next is payment of claims that was received by the board from Diana Caffarelli earlier. Any questions on anything there?
None from me.
No.
Okay. There's a number of adoption of minutes. These were the last minutes from 2019 that Lauren and Christina have been working on. We thought we finished them last time, but as it turns out, we had a couple of stragglers. So there are a couple of additional coming through here. So I think now we really are finished with 2019, right? Yes. Okay, that's really all we have for administrative items. So Nick, maybe we should just open the public hearing, the last of the last public hearing on our street and sidewalk opening. Are you back on your internet?
A motion. Yep, I am. So we'll need a motion to open that.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 So this is a continuation of a public hearing with respect to modifications to the town code pertaining to when permits are obtained from the highway department for street openings. It could be as simple as a curb cut for a new driveway or an addition of the driveway curb cut. But more typically, it's when utilities are cutting into the town roads or the town right of way or the sidewalk. It's called a street opening permit, but it includes both the travel way, the pavement, as well as the curb, the sidewalk, and the grass area, anything that's within the town right of way. So, for example, if there's a new gas line going in or repair to a gas line, Con Edison would obtain a street opening permit. We did provide copies of the local law to the utility companies for review and comment. We received 2 sets of comments from Con Edison, and our office with Jill and staff had at least 2 good extended phone calls with Con Edison, listened to their concerns, and accepted and recognized that some of them made sense, worked with how they ran their operations, and were still consistent with the intent of the local law and did not affect how the town's interest with respect to bonds or required insurance, or with the way that the highway department said that the roadways needed to be repaired. This was the most significant change, was a requirement that the roads be repaired to a certain standard, and it varies based upon how long the curb cut is, how deep the curb, how long the cut is, as well as the age of the roadway. The concern, of course, is that the town paves a roadway and then it gets cut open 6 months later, or as Jill has told me, even sooner than that. So this requires them to, in those instances, to repave it to the same specifications as it was before, curb to curb, and for a specific length. All is detailed in the local law. Additionally, it allows for the town, when the police chief determines it's appropriate for public safety purposes, to require that the utility company pay for a town police officer to be there to control the traffic, rather than the use of private flaggers by the utility company. And that's
Well, actually, if I can just stop you, Nick, that's actually not true. So it's not that the police officer would be in lieu of the flaggers. The utilities are always going to be responsible for the flaggers and for the control of traffic. But the mere presence of a police car and a police officer there is a traffic calming device, for lack of a better term. And it is our hope that certainly within the hamlet, on some of our narrow, windy roads, that the addition of a police car is really going to be able to slow traffic down and make sure that the flaggers are doing their job and making sure that the motorists are being respectful to the flaggers. But it was never our intention to take and replace the flaggers with police officers, perhaps in addition to, but certainly not to replace. The utilities will always be responsible for providing flaggers. And actually, that was one of the comments that we spoke about earlier today among staff, based upon comments that we received from Con Ed late yesterday afternoon. They came back to us with 6 additional comments. We have to tell you that a number of their comments were very thoughtful, and we implemented all but the last of them in total. So basically everything Con Ed asked us for, we agreed to. That's all good.
Good, and then thank you, Joe, for that clarification. My last comment then is that before the town board is tonight's public hearing on the local law, and then in your packet is also a resolution to adopt the local law, also a resolution to amend the fee schedule pertaining to street opening permits, as well as a resolution adopting that diagram that sets forth the road repair specifications.
Right.
Just for clarity, Joe, when you say that anything that Con Edison wanted, we agreed to, Con Edison is not necessarily a fan of this legislation by itself. So we agreed to, I mean, I'm serious, so people understand. We are working in partner with them to find a reasonable resolution, but they do not want this legislation. It benefits the town, affects the municipality.
You're right. I was certainly loose with my language there. Let's put it this way. They asked us for several modest modifications in language, things like replacing the word Sunday with weekends and holiday weekends when it came to applying for permits because you need to apply for a permit within 72 hours, even when it comes to emergency work. They were concerned if emergency work occurred late Friday over a holiday weekend, that they would be in a penalty situation because we were not open.
Right. You don't have to go
and they
through it
would
all.
not be able to abide by our legislation. Minor changes like that. Asking us whether or not, for instance, we would consider changing the recessed plate requirement to New York City winter standards. We declined to do that. We split the difference and we changed it so that it's April 15th, November 15th through April 15th instead of November 1 to April 30th. Slight modifications like that, but the tenor of the legislation remains. They're not very happy with it, but when it came to the the end of the day, those minor modifications that they offered to us, we tried very hard to work with them about it. This was just a far more modest request than the first conversation that we had with them. So, sorry, should have put it in context.
And so then we need, right, because there were certainly a number of comments I made that were not accepted and certainly rejected. So the next step would
Yeah.
be to open tonight's hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So have we received any comments from the public, Christina?
Sorry,
You're on mute.
please to unmute. No, we have not received any comments. Mm-mm.
Okay. And do we have any comments coming through now over Zoom? I see
No,
a note from Terry that says we don't have any comments on YouTube,
Tim said, Lyle said the same.
and Lyle said the same. Okay.
No followers. All of us have no followers on YouTube. That's really pathetic. We're sad.
I think they're just so happy that they're not going to have to hear about this legislation again, and we're finally going to institute it, that they're all speechless.
So do we have a motion to, is it close the public hearing tonight?
Moved.
Do we need to
Yes.
keep it open for comment, or are we ready?
No, I mean,
No,
in my
it's-
opinion, it's not legally required. Sorry.
I don't think it's
It's
not a
also
matter
the
of being
third time that
legally
we've
required.
had the legislation on.
I think it's just a very beneficial legislation for the municipality. So
Absolutely.
I'm ready to close it out and move forward. So
Okay.
we need a second on that to close it.
Second.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
We want to move to the resolution.
Yep, we can do that.
I can go through quickly. I move to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $454,955.81 listed on the summary pre-check writing report and detailed voucher detail report, each prepared on March 30th, 2020. Checks will be issued and mailed to each claim listed on Wednesday, April 1st, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to adopt the following minutes: May 28th, all of 2019, Town Board, June 18th, work session, August 26th, work session, September 10th, work session, October 2nd, work session, October 15th, Town Board, and for 2020, February 25th, work session / Town Board, March 17th, work session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to adopt the local law to amend Chapter 111, Article 1 of the Code of the Town of Newcastle concerning street and sidewalk permits.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to allow Lisa Katz to do this one.
This is regard to amending the master fee schedule concerning excavation permits. Whereas we are allowed to amend that. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board hereby amends the master fee schedule to provide as follows with respect to excavation permit fees as set forth in the resolution.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Am I going again?
Sure.
Hold on, but hold on. I just got a text. George, County Executive Latimer, and Ellen Hendricks have been trying to be on, have been disconnected a couple of times. So I don't know if that's them there now.
I think that might be them who's on the call.
So let's get them on.
I'm on. This is George. I'm on now. If you can hear me.
Yes, thank you, George.
We
We
got you.
apologize.
Hear you.
And Ellen, we're
Hi.
sorry. I didn't realize you were there.
That's okay. We're waiting to whenever you tell us.
Ivy takes the lead, but
Have we concluded with the resolutions, or we
I think there's one more
We-
resolution.
We'll come
I
back
know.
to them
We,
later.
we,
we
we
can
have
come
a
back?
couple more. We'll come
And
back.
the proposed actions, we can come back.
Okay, so we're joined by our county executive, George Latimer, and Ellen Hendricks from his team, who have graciously agreed to come and appear before the town board this evening as a part of our virtual meeting to give us an update on the county's efforts in preparation for and now response to the coronavirus pandemic. So thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you very much, Madam Supervisor, members of the board. Ellen Hendricks, who's on with myself, we appreciate the opportunity. We'll try to give you a quick update on where we're at, and then to answer any questions that you may have. Westchester County, as of today's numbers from the state, are just shy of 10,000 positive cases. And that is a significant number. Other than New York City, it's the largest of any county in New York State. However, we have tested 35,000 people as part of the process. So we're running about 3.5 to 1 in terms of the number of people tested who are not positive versus those that are positive. And we're running a little lower percentage of cases per testing than some other parts of the state. None of the statistics really matter at this stage of the game. We have slightly under 300 people hospitalized in Westchester County from the disease, and we have lost 25 of our neighbors from the disease in Westchester County. Those percentages of hospitalization and death are well below what the standard numbers are, but we are not yet at the peak of this. So we're obviously concerned about where we go. The magic number is how many hospital beds do we have and how many people do we have sick that need them. If you presume that we start to get up closer to 20% hospitalization on the base of the number of people who have cases now, that would mean about 1,800 hospitalized people. Well, we're well below that at the 270s. But as the numbers rise, our figures are 3,000 hospital beds, possibly as many as another 1,600 that we could put into business in Westchester. So we have some flexibility, but not a lot. And the amount of hospital beds, the amount of professionals, the personal protective equipment, the PPEs, the masks, the gloves, the gowns that we have available, and most importantly, the ventilators will make the difference of how many people's lives we can save. Obviously, what a village can do, what a town can do, what a county can do is limited, and we need the state. Obviously, it's been very aggressive here. We need the federal government as well to help us. But from our standpoint, we've made the county center available to the state to set up additional hospital beds. We've made the Glen Island Park available to the state to set it up as a drive-through testing facility. There's also testing going on at the Westchester Medical Center and some other selected hospitals. Our county health department nurses are working alongside the State Department health nurses in-home testing, and that's pretty much why we have as high testing as we do. I think that there's a perception, as it was originally in New Rochelle, that because we have a lot of high cases, that means we are a hot spot for the disease. I think it's the lack of testing in other places that hides the amount of the spread of the contagion. I think we've been pretty upfront about where that is. We have numbers that are a little bit dated. I try to have your supervisor alerted every day to the number. Today's number that we have for Newcastle is 42. That's probably lower than the reality world out there. But just to give you a rough idea of how that compares, we have 56 cases in Mount Kisco, 28 cases in the town of Newcastle, 28 cases in Pleasantville, 105 cases in the town of Yorktown, and 99 cases in the town of Portland. So a rough idea of what you're facing. Ossining Village has 153 cases. So we've generally found that the higher the population, the more the cases, the smaller the population, the lesser the cases. As you could imagine, Buchanan, North Salem, Poundridge have the smallest number, single digits, low single digits, and Yonkers, New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, White Plains, Greenburgh have the highest amount of cases. From a county standpoint, what we're trying to do, I've aforementioned the county center for hospital beds, the Glen Island for testing. Our emergency operations center in Hawthorne, Valhalla, has done a lot about serving as a clearinghouse for orders for PPEs, personal protective equipment, hand sanitizer, things of that nature. I assume the town has made requests. Hopefully the town has gotten back the items that they have requested. We bunch the requests together, deliver them to Albany. Albany delivers the material to our EOC, and then we turn around and redistribute it out to the towns and the cities around the county. That's one of our major responsibilities. The Beeline bus system may not be a big part of your town's mix of transportation, but we've made some major changes to that system. We have shut off access to the driver of the bus by cordoning off the front of the bus from any passengers. So passengers come in the rear, they exit the rear, and they don't pay any fare. We have lifted the fares for Beeline buses in order to try to protect our drivers. If we have our drivers go out of service, then we don't have a system to run the buses at all. So in quest of maintaining the basics of the system, we're protecting the driver, no Beeline bus fares. And I might add, tomorrow, Wednesday, begins what's called enhanced Saturday schedule weekday, which is a cut back in the number of runs every day. If anybody in the town, any of your constituents use a Beeline bus on a regular basis, they should go on the website, check it out, find out what the changes are, and then adjust accordingly. Our county park system remains open, and that's been a source of some controversy. Some folks believe we should close all parks. I don't know what the town's position has been on your parks, but we made the decision that because there's so few other recreations open to people, bars, restaurants, gyms, health clubs, bowling alleys, you name it, everything else, theaters are closed, we wanted our outdoor recreation to remain open. However, we have some major use parks, the Kensico Dam Plaza, Playland Beach and Boardwalk, Ward Pound Ridge, where we've seen we're having difficulty maintaining social distancing when people attend. So I have said more than once, when our parks and our police department is out there trying to enforce social distancing, and lightly, we're not looking to, create a riot scene. If ultimately people do not respect the rules that they should be following, we will close down individual parks. We don't think we need to close down our nature centers, our trails and hiking, because you never get the kind of concentrated individuals, there that could, in theory, be together and spread a virus. The same applies to our golf courses. I know you have Hudson Hills just over the border in Ossining and a few others. Some folks find it illogical that we keep a golf course open and we shut down a basketball court, but it's because golf is naturally amenable to social distancing. You don't have contact in golf. You can, golf, you can tee off and hole out on a green and not be in close proximity if you just keep your distances and one person per cart, which is our current rule, if we can enforce that. So we're trying to make sure there is some recreation for the people of Westchester County as part of what they deal with. Our economic development team, headed by Bridget Gibbons, is trying to collate information that would be available. We're working through the Millwood Chappaqua Chamber of Commerce and the other chambers to provide some information of some webinars today to be helpful to them as we go through this terrible economic downturn. This is cataclysmic by any standard, but we can't deal with the economic problem until we deal with the health problem, and the health problem is by no means resolved. However, we're all looking to see what the stimulus that the feds have passed represents. We're going to try to stay on top of it. I know that our federal officials are, going to get information and fact sheets out to us. Hopefully what will happen is we'll be able to have a clear vision of how individuals and small businesses and large businesses, for that matter, can appeal for some of those situations. We put out a new policy for first responders. I think the way to put it down shortly is when responding, assume that whatever place you're going to has COVID. The number of cases are rising fast. There's a lag between the state knowledge and when we have it at the local level. So I think for the protection of EMS, fire, police, presume when you respond to a private home or whatever, you're dealing with a COVID patient, and protect yourself with PPE accordingly. There are some other protocols that are involved in that has been sent out, I think, to the town, and you should have it. You can circulate it. If for any reason you don't have it, Ellen's on the line. She'll make a note of it and make sure you get it tomorrow. We also have from the state a new policy on releasing people from isolation. It is a less severe policy than the one that was originally in effect that required 14 days and then 2 negative testing. There's not enough test kits to allow for that, plus to test all the new people that need to be tested. So the state has changed their policies. We adopt whatever the state does and implement whatever their law is. So that has come to pass as well. I'm going to stop there because you have other business, and I want to make sure if there's any questions you have that we can try to answer it. We want to be a good partner to the town and to the villages and the cities. Ivy has participated in our 3 times a week conference calls where we try to address the issues. We've used our county attorney to try to interpret some of the executive orders and give some help so that you and your town attorney, town council can, corporation council can benefit from it, some other policies. So hopefully, we'll get through this. It will not be easy. This is all, there's no roadmap for any of us here. But we're trying to do our best. We know you're doing your best, and hopefully as a partnership, we'll get through it.
Great. Thank you for that, George. We appreciate it. So I do have the benefit of being on the calls with George and Ellen and his team. So I'll actually take a back seat and let the other town board members who don't have that opportunity speak up if any of you have any questions that you'd like to pose to the county executive.
Well, on those calls as well, but I'd have some questions just for clarity purposes. Thank you both George and Ellen. The county center is not to be used ultimately for treatment of COVID patients. It's for overflow for other patients who are otherwise with other conditions. And then the second,
that's what we understand from the state DOH. They're the ones in charge of it, and we've read that most recently.
And then the second piece of clarity is I understand the state has been getting ventilators and holding on to them for when needed. Are they doling them out, for lack of a better term, to the counties now, or are they waiting to do so in the event that we need them locally?
Well, they haven't. They haven't doled.
Wow.
Yes, they haven't doled any out as such. To counties as such. The governor and the state DOH is working with the Greater New York Hospital Association, and they're dealing with the hospitals as an entity. And you're correct. They've identified that the extra beds, whether it's in our county center, the Javits Convention Center, and other locations that they've identified, is meant to be for patients that do not have COVID, so that they can use as many hospital beds in the actual hospitals and upgrade them to the most extent possible for ICUs. I assume as they have a stash of ventilators, they'll move them around, where they're needed. And, we talk in terms of how many hospital beds we have in Westchester, 3,000, how many cases we might have in Westchester. But, I'm pretty much assured that if we have an open bed, it will be filled by somebody who needs it, whether they're from the county or not. All of that is managed through the state DOH. We are there to provide whatever our material and our, facilities that they ask for.
Thank you. And the last question I had is if the county could provide some just clarity, if one of our residents has test positive and a family member, whether they have, well, I guess if they haven't, what is the responsibility of self-quarantine for that family member? If they're one step away from the infected person, is it okay for them to ride their bike in town? Is it okay for them to go on a walk in the neighborhood, assuming social distancing rules apply here? Or should they be self-quarantining? You can get some guidance, because I think that's important as our numbers increase and people know or believe someone might have it, but more importantly, if someone does, what should that person be doing and about it? Meaning the one step away.
Right. Well, if they're living in the home with a person who is tested positive, and that person is in isolation, but the nuclear family member, the spouse, the unemancipated child is also living in the home with the individual who is tested positive, you're going to have to assume that that person is likely to be positive as well. If they don't show symptoms, then there may not be a priority to test. If they show any kind of symptoms, sore throat, fever, and so forth, then that other member of the family should be tested. But in our experience, once there's a husband, wife, children at home scenario, one tests positive, they all test positive. And even if they haven't tested yet, the presumption is they're highly contagious, and they could give the disease out if they do go outside in any kind of fashion. So they should join in isolation. If it's more likely where this happens to be a problem is in a workplace scenario where you're not in the other person's workspace all the time, unless the two of you sit closely together and you're always in consultation, then the other situation, as I described with the nuclear family, applies. But in a private home setting or an apartment setting where one person is positive, you have to assume that the people that live with them have been exposed more than casually, most likely are positive, and they should either call it a precautionary quarantine if you want, or a pre-isolation, but they really should not be outside. They're most likely having it, and they're most likely going to be very contagious.
But that, I'm sorry to follow up, George, but that's voluntary. There's no enforcement mechanism to ensure that they stay home?
Well, look, when we're dealing now with 10,000 cases across the county, there's not enough enforcement to do enforcement as you might think of with a police officer watching, standing guard, that type of situation. What we're hoping, obviously, is to be clear with a person when they test positive. So if John tests positive, then the news to him is like, are you home with Mary and your 3 kids? Then Mary and the 3 kids have been exposed through you, and you should be inside. Now, to the extent that somebody sees somebody that should be in the house and they decide to report them, we will then have a more aggressive policing. But right now, with the number of people that we're dealing with and the number of people that we're likely to deal with, the enforcement mechanism is going to be very difficult. You know the kind of society we live in. People can come and go very easily, get out of their house, walk around the block, be back in the house before anybody might detect them. So I think the most important thing to do is to make sure that people understand what their responsibilities are and to try to enforce it, in that fashion. Obviously, if, somebody knows of somebody that should be quarantined or should be isolated and they're not doing it in an aggressive, I don't care kind of way, then by all means report it and then we'll take more direct action.
And if I
Thank you very
may,
much for taking that, George. Thank you.
if I may,
You're going to add something, Ellen? Go ahead.
yes, Jeremy, for everybody, I sent out a couple of days ago the isolation FAQs, which also does state, not specifically for someone, a family member, but that if someone ignores the isolation order, then it is a crime punishable under Section 12B of the Public Health Law. So, and additionally, the Department of Health can confine you to a medical facility for failing to comply. And I guess that's the person who's most distinctly under isolation. But, you might indicate that and people might take it a little bit more seriously.
Thank you, Ellen.
Mm-hmm.
Ellen, does that also apply to people we're seeing kind of in parks or just around town who aren't social distancing when they should be in terms of the enforcement?
Well, I wouldn't suggest that the isolation order, ignoring the isolation order is a I would suggest that ignoring the isolation order is a crime, but not necessarily not practicing social distancing. But you certainly can have police suggest to people that they employ social distancing. Correct, George?
Yes, that's correct, Ellen.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What other questions do we have from town board members while we have the county executive and Ellen Hendricks on the phone?
All right, I have one more. Are you going to forward us? I know there's obviously grant and type of fiscal help packages coming from both the federal government and the state, but will you be having, I guess, the county attorneys look at some of these and perhaps, roll them out and FAQ to the individual towns so that we can best help our merchants and not just that, but residents who are have either lost their jobs or have been significantly impacted by this?
Yes, that's our plan. We want to serve as a clearinghouse of information as it affects, people across the county, and we'll work through local governments and local business organizations. Ellen specifically has been in touch with Chuck Schumer's office, and since Schumer was so critical in the creation of this federal stimulus program, we're hopeful that they'll be able to outline how it would be implemented. Now, there's a buzz out there that before the end of the summer, there'll be a second stimulus, because the one that was just adopted went so far but no further. We're trying to guess national politics in a political election year. Very hard to do. But as soon as we get a handle on what this bill allows for, we'll try to share that information with you as we have other things. That's how we view our job as a county government. We are a local government just like you. We're a bigger local government. We have some regional responsibilities, but we are your partner in these things. We're not superior to you in the way that the state is superior to all of us. So we'll try to figure it out, interpret it. We have some additional people that can do that on staff, more than the town might have, and we'll try to do this as a partnership if we can.
Okay, thank you.
As far as the business loans and so forth, the Economic Development Office has been putting out emails. I'm not quite sure who would be getting it in Newcastle, but I can certainly forward it. So there's some links, there are webinars and information, and you can also reach out to Economic Development, the Economic Development Office. I think that's economic development at westchestergov.com.
That's right.
So they can give you information.
And we can always do a follow-up meeting with Bridget Gibbons, Sherry Asher, Deb Novick, with a regional group of people in your area of the county. Once we get a good handle on things, obviously we'll involve Congresswoman Lowy's staff, Congressman Maloney's staff, since they're nearby, their jurisdiction's nearby. And, we can pull something together once we're able to actually meet in person.
George, while we have you on the phone, I was wondering if you could give our town board as well as the public here in Newcastle an update on the work that the county is doing with regard to the collection of local property taxes.
Yeah, as it stands now, Ivy, we have a proposal which is going before the County Board of Legislators. They're going to discuss it now. We're looking at allowing individuals who assert that they have a financial hardship, the ability to pay their taxes instead of on April 30th, that they would pay their taxes as late as July 15th without penalty. That ties into the same date that they would file their state and federal taxes, and it would allow them 75 days, which we hope will be the 75 days by which the stimulus package will be established, and then we will all know just what kind of benefits individuals are going to get. About 65% of property taxes are paid by mortgage companies or banks. And so those companies are going to be required to pay as they normally would. When I pay my mortgage payment in March, if I can't make my April payment, that's a matter between the mortgage company and myself. But the mortgage company itself should pay the town and the county taxes on time. The individual who's paying their own taxes, whether it's a business or an individual, would come to the town in lieu of paying their taxes, submit a letter asserting a hardship, and then the town would be in a position to then, assess whether it's a legitimate hardship on whatever standards you set, and then waive any penalties through July 15th. Now, we'll talk in terms of some of the internal situations that between the town and the county. The town is required to provide 60% of the amount that they collect out of 100% levy. If they don't collect 100% levy, they still only have to give the county 60% of the levy amount in May. And if we find that we're having big trouble with tax collections, we'll then negotiate what the differences are. But that flexibility, we don't think will be needed for the first payment. By the time we get around to the second payment later in the year, we're going to know whether we're in full economic depression or not. I don't know about the town, but the county's finances are in free fall. Our sales tax has dropped to almost zero. We have no hotel occupancy tax money coming in. We've had to forego the bus revenue, as I've just described. Mortgage recording tax is going to be way off plan. And we're spending money for emergency purposes in all those departments I've just mentioned. So we have a free fall budget, but we have obligations for tax anticipation notes. So if the revenue does not come into the county, the 60% piece of it, if it doesn't come in on time, we're going to be in financial difficulties. We're going to drop. And I suspect the town will be in the same position if we were to just forego collecting any taxes. So we think that allowing a taxpayer that has a hardship, assert you have a hardship, give us a letter that asserts what it is, and the us is you get to make the decision. If you think it's not worthy, you don't have to grant it. If you do, you can. And then at that point in time, the person will have an additional 75 days to pay their taxes without any penalty.
Well, so I'm just hearing this for the first time, everybody on the call. So so I've not reacted to this yet. But the one thing I will just say, County Executive and Ellen, with regard to what you've just suggested, is that to the extent that if there is a hardship eligibility criteria, to the extent that we are able to standardize that across municipalities, I think that having some consistency would be beneficial to all of us in local government.
I think we could, and by the way, this is a proposal before the board. They have not yet acted on it. They've been briefed on it. They're going to discuss it now. I think that is a follow-up advisory that could be done. I would like to see it done in concert with the towns so that there's a dialogue. You know, Ivy, you've listened to the calls. Some of your colleagues want to do it, and some of your colleagues don't want to do it. And so we're put in a position of saying, well, if we do it, we want to give each community the maximum amount of flexibility. What that looks like is iffy. And then, there's the provision that you can opt out or opt in or do it for your town taxes or opt out of that. So, if Greenberg wants to do one thing and North Salem wants to do something else, which is what I heard on the calls, just like you did, that flexibility is granted. But we will discuss how can we get a sort of a standardized set of criteria without locking it into law so that each community can adjust it if they see fit.
Great. Thank you for that. Appreciate the transparency on where things stand right now and what you guys are thinking about.
And what you've just heard has also been heard. I think we just spoke to the Village of Sleepy Hollow prior to this. But tomorrow it will be, announced as a proposal to all of your other colleagues. So you have sort of the advanced skinny on it at this stage of the game.
Thank you. We like that.
Well, you're special.
The other thing, that we continue to get a lot of questions about locally, and I know that you've heard this on all of the sort of every other day calls that we've been having, but we do get a lot of questions and concerns about the essential businesses and whether landscaping qualifies as such.
Aye.
I know that every time we have one of those calls, it seems like the question kind of recirculates. But
the state has been inconsistent on the way they've, advised us. They gave us one set of advisory, then they've changed it. And I can understand that there could always be a modification and a change, but we've seemed to yo-yo back and forth a bit.
If I may, I was on the state call a little while ago. And of course that comes up. That comes up on every state call as well. And they basically said, ignore the guidelines for agriculture and marketing. As a matter of fact, I think it might have been pulled and they're revising it. And just follow the EDC guidelines. So if you have to do any landscaping, if it's for nuisances such as rodents, then that is what should be the operating measure, at least for now, until they finish their redefinition.
Okay. Well, that will be a change then, I think, for a lot of communities. And the challenge we've been having and discussing locally is that to the extent that there was conflicting guidelines, taking the more restrictive view with regard to what was possible for landscapers would, both put us into conflict with neighboring communities and would also potentially hurt an industry, that employs a lot of folks who, could potentially be worst hit from an economic perspective by the outbreak. So I guess we'll discuss it more tomorrow, and we'll look forward to coming into compliance with what other folks are doing as well.
Makes sense.
Very good.
So I'm
Anything
looking out
else
at my
that
Zoom
you'd like to
screen.
ask?
Yeah. Anyone else? Questions? Comments? I'm getting a lot of shaking heads. I know that Ellen and County Executive Latimer, you're on the phone. So, but I'm getting a lot of no's, a lot of shaking heads out in the Zoom audience here. So I guess then we'll just say thank you very much for taking time. I know that you're making the rounds and visiting a number of town boards this evening, as you have been doing over the course of several consecutive evenings. And so we thank you for taking the time to come and be a part of this gathering. It's tremendously
Well,
helpful.
and thank you for your courtesy, and we really do appreciate it. We look forward to working with you together.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Have a good night.
Thank you both.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Back to our resolution.
Yeah, sounds good.
Take it away, Lisa.
So we're up to proposed actions. Number 1.
Put you on the spot, didn't I?
Are we, is that where we are, proposed actions and not the number 5? Did we finish number 5 of the resolutions?
I'm sorry, who seconded number 5?
1 second.
I don't know that we
No,
read
we
it.
Look and see.
I don't think we read number 5 yet. That was what we were about to.
Number 5.
Number 5, we got, yeah, correct.
Okay, sorry, I was on mute. I was talking. Okay, this is an authorization to adopt the minimum restoration limits diagram. Whereas the town board seeks to maintain a well-functioning, aesthetically pleasing road network. God, this is small, hold on. And is committed to reserving the road network. And whereas construction activity can disrupt that. Now therefore be it resolved that pursuant to chapter 111-13 of the Code of the Town Newcastle, the minimum pavement restoration limits diagram dated January 21st, 2020, attached here 2 is hereby adopted by the town board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Jason, you want to go?
We are doing the appointment to the planning board.
Correct.
Okay. I am missing the name. I'm blanking on his name because it's not written in here, of course.
His name.
Eldad?
Yes.
Yes.
Go through.
What was his last name again?
I'm probably slaughtering it, but it's Gotho.
Spell it.
G
G-O.
O T-H-E-L-F.
Golthef. All right. I move to appoint Eldad Golthef as a member of the planning board for a 5-year term effective April 1st, 2020 through March 31st, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize deep cleaning services of various town-owned buildings from our currently contracted cleaning company, Quality Facility Solutions, for a total cost of $14,313.04 for all buildings.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Lauren, you want to go, or should I keep going?
I can go. I move to authorize the hiring of Puro Clean of Northern Westchester for advanced cleaning services for Town Hall and the Police Department for a combined total of $14,770.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I move to adopt the following resolution, whereas General Municipal Law 103(1) authorizes local governments to receive electronic bids or offers in connection with purchase contracts, including contracts for service work, but excluding any purchase contracts necessary for the completion of public works contract pursuant to Article 8 of the Labor Law. And whereas the town board may by resolution authorize the town clerk to accept bids in electronic format in accordance with Article 3 of the New York State Technology Law. And whereas the method used for electronic submission will at a minimum document the time and date of receipt of the bids received electronically, authenticate the identity of the sender, ensure the security of the information transmitted, and ensure the confidentiality of the bid until the time and date established for the opening bids. Now therefore, be it resolved, the town board of Town of Newcastle hereby authorizes the receipt of bids in an electronic format.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize the purchase of bulletproof vests in the amount of $10,450 from Security Uniforms for 11 replacement vests per the 5-year replacement plan for the Newcastle Police Department, which is eligible for 50% reimbursement from the Department of Justice BVB grant.
Before you second that, Jill,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is a hard question to ask because, and it shouldn't be misconstrued. As we're looking at our finances, I'm no way asserting that this is not a proper investment, but is that 5-year replacement plan based on the life cycle of a vest? And that's why we're coming to this replacement as opposed to, hey, let's just get new ones. And again, to be very,
Yeah,
very clear,
no.
no way am I want to jeopardize my law enforcement officers. I'm just curious, is this a sort of a standard, the health and life of the vest has exceeded its useful life, and therefore we're now moving to get new ones? This is something that we do.
Exactly right. And we've been lucky because we've been eligible for grants, and this is yet another one that we've been able to secure. So they are normally obviously twice the price of this, and we actually want to be able to we will be allowed for, well, I take it back, we will be allowed to submit for 50% reimbursement after the payment has been made. So we need to purchase these. We will get a 50% reimbursement as part of the grant for it, but we need to lay out the money first. And according to our police department, the vests have a 45-day lead time, so it's not like we have to get them not like we're getting them immediately. So it takes a little while for the process to go through.
And lastly, I just, we discussed some of the other transactions here in financial issues, but that one was not discussed. So I'm not asserting that it's less important than cleaning town hall. It's just that this is something that was not as discussed as thoroughly.
No. And yes, and actually, so yes, this is clearly a safety issue. The vests have a useful life, and obviously we need to make sure that our officers are properly outfitted. The second thing is that
I think that's enough.
I don't know.
No, I think it's fine. I just wanted clarity.
Okay.
I think Lisa seconded, so
Did.
Oh, all
Okay.
in favor?
aye.
Aye.
So I believe that is all of the resolutions.
Yes, that's all. of the
Yes.
resolutions.
Okay. Does the board want to give me some dates so that we might be able to finish our executive session discussions with the advice of counsel and contracts for either later this week or next week? Can we circulate an email with some available times and dates? We'd like Sabrina to be available, Nick to be available to join us. Okay, so that we can, and then we will be able to duly notice the meeting.
Sure.
You're talking
Right.
about this
Our-
week, a little nuts for me, but I'm pretty free next week.
I think next week.
Yeah,
Okay, so
next week.
next week we don't have a regularly scheduled meeting. Our next scheduled meeting would be on April 14th. And then once we meet on April 14th, we're meeting again on the 14th, the 21st, and the 28th. So we're back to our regular weekly schedule at that point. Okay, I will send an email around, try to get everybody's availability. Lisa, if you want to take and suggest a couple of dates that might be better or worse, or anybody else, I'll take and put it together, and I have Nick's schedule, and I'll see what we can come up with. Okay?
Great. Thank you.
All right. All right.
I move to adjourn?
Well,
No?
thank you, everybody.
Second.
All in favor?